Advanced TV Herstory, the podcast that brings you fresh perspective on the importance of TV in our lives. We tell stories of leadership, persistence, and achievement of TV women, because in the lives of women, no other media platform has influenced or inspired so many. Lo, these 60 years. Women of all ages have been impacted by what they've seen and will see on TV. So join us for a little Advanced TV Herstory by streaming it directly on our website, tvherstory.com, or anywhere you find podcasts. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.
TV Herstorians, oh my gosh, we are in for something special today, because anytime I get to talk about Anna Patty Duke, and I'm going to try my hardest to call her Anna, because you know what? If she was sitting in my living room at any point in the last 20 years, I would have straightened up and flown right, as it were. So welcome to Advanced TV Herstory. This is the podcast where you get to hear a little bit more about the fascinating TV women behind the scenes, as well as those we've seen on the screen and loved on the screen for almost 60 years. The small screen. One of those women, without question, in my heart, will always be Anna Patty Duke. And it gives me great pleasure today to bring to you all one of the first podcast interviews that Bill Jankowski has done regarding his book, which just was published 2 months ago, In the Presence of Greatness, My 60-Year Journey as an Actress, which is in fact the posthumous memoir that Anna Patty Duke, had never written. And so it's just this awesome, fascinating thing. So first and foremost, welcome, Bill, to Advanced TV Herstory.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. It's glad to finally be doing this. We've been talking forever, so it's nice that it's actually happening.
Yes, well, I am thrilled that it's happening, because this is a great book, and it's a true one of a kind. She is not one who had really she had told her story. She had told her story in very focused venues, and so her first big book, which was Call Me Anna, the second book, which was entitled, what was her second book again?
A Brilliant Madness. That was about her bipolar disorder. Yeah.
Yes, A Brilliant Madness. And we're going to talk all about that. Listeners, you're in for a real treat today, because you perhaps have now just sensed my great passion and respect for this woman performer, this consummate talent who was in fact recognized across the Emmy Awards, the TV powers that be for the last 40 years. She was recognized with an Academy Award, and at one point was the youngest performer, or at least actress, to have received an Academy Award. And then Tatum O'Neal took that from her in 72 with Paper Moon. And then she was also on Broadway, and in fact earned a Tony before there was such a thing as a Tony for her work with The Miracle Worker. This interview, though, even if you just have a vague recollection or a vague understanding of who she is, please hang with us, because really what this is to speak very positively about this woman who took time with Bill to recall some of her most fascinating and memorable moments in the entertainment business that she had been in literally her whole life. And then we'll just instruct you, if you really want to learn more, number one, buy Bill's book, and number two, even go back to Call Me Anna, because this is America as we know it. And then finally, the first book and the second book really couch her diagnosis of being bipolar, which now, here we are in 2018, we might say to ourselves, we could see this. We've seen this train wreck before. Well, she takes us through it, not just once, not just twice, but in fact revisits now in her mid-60s, when she was telling Bill all about this, how she needed to make relationships right. So we'll get into that as well. Bill Jankowski, known to nobody, comes out of the blue to have this fascinating relationship with one of America's most, treasured performers. Bill, tell us about yourself and how you got to this point in a relationship with Anna.
Sure. Anna was not of my generation. I'm not a boomer. I will be turning...
Well, I'm a boomer, but she's an older boomer.
Yeah, she was on the spectrum, I guess you could say. She was born in 46, which is the first year of the boomers. So she's...
1946 is the birth year of Hillary Clinton and Liza Minnelli.
And actually, we had a Hillary Clinton chapter in the book originally that I deleted, but there is a Liza Minnelli chapter.
Interesting.
But anyway, when I was 8 years old, reruns of the Patty Duke Show were on Nick at Night, which were already close to, 25, 30 years old at that point. And I would just watch them, and I was just enthralled by this actress that I seriously, I know this sounds stupid and whatever, but it's true. I really did think that she was two different people, that Patty and Kathy were two different people for, I don't know, a good year or so when I was 8 years old. And till I realized that this was one actress playing two different parts. I didn't fall for it with Haley Mills in The Parent Trap, even though I love her and love that film, but I did with her in The Patty Duke Show.
And you had the whole thing figured out with Lindsay Lohan and The Parent Trap.
Yeah, by that time I was already probably college age, or at least in high school, but whenever that remake came out. So yeah, but so I was just enthralled with this actress. And then I remember learning about, indirectly related to her, I remember having to do a book report about Helen Keller in elementary school, and learning about her. And of course, Patty Duke and the Miracle Worker came up somewhere in my research, my elementary school research there. And so I just wanted to know more about this lady, Patty Duke. And I had rented The Miracle Worker, the original Miracle Worker with Anne Bancroft, and couldn't believe that here's this actress in the Patty Duke Show who's a teenager in the 60s who made me believe she was two different people. And then here's her slightly younger in the 60s making me believe that she was deaf and blind and mute. Just extraordinary. And I felt like I didn't know more about this person.
You were a self-made authority, which, I mean, I interviewed Brian Johnson, who has pretty much become the foremost.
Joan Crawford? Mm.
Yes, exactly. So, this is it's some sort of a life's calling that some of these women who have not been treasured and celebrated enough, that you guys you're holding them in our hearts. And I give you all a lot of credit for all of the time and the space, the real estate that you are holding in what otherwise would be just a big blank field of forgotten names and careers. Because you're right, the talent, those early 60s, she was doing, it is more than Valley of the Dolls, which, by the way, Valley of the Dolls in and of itself is a phenomenal testament to the 60s.
Yes, it is.
Just
time capsule. Yeah.
Yes, just watch it to watch it. You don't even have to listen. Sometimes I think not listening is better. You do a certain framework. You do the foreword of the book. We're going to jump to the book that you've written now. How is it that you were having conversations with her and corresponding with her, whatever, and you finally said, you've really got a lot here to share. Let's do this. And how did that come to be?
Well, to give you a short kind of Reader's Digest version of our friendship together, again, when I was 10 in 1990, I became, I guess you could say, obsessed with Patty Duke. And then about, 8 years later, I wrote her a fan letter. I found her address in a celebrity address book at Barnes & Noble, and I thought I would write it. And I included my email address, which was pretty new at the time. This is mid to late 90s. And I just included the email address, like I said. And then, I don't know, 5 days or so later, I got a lovely email from her husband, basically saying that we read your email. This is us. Let's keep in touch. It's the nicest fan letter we've ever read. And I wish I'd saved a copy of that letter, but I didn't. And let's keep this going. And so, yeah, I mean, right after that, she hadn't even met me yet. I was 17. And it was just 20 years ago, earlier this month, where she did an online chat for me, which, if you recall, back in the pre-Twitter and Facebook social media days, celebrities often did these online chats that were hosted, and people would write, there was moderators, and then people would write questions, and they would type the answers, and the celebrities. So I hosted one of them, and she didn't even know me yet. And we hadn't met in person, like I said. And then later that year, she was going to be doing the Patty Duke reunion movie up in Montreal. And she introduced me to one of the producers of the film, who subsequently invited me up to the set that December of 98 when they were shooting up there. So I got to meet her for the first time then. Then over the subsequent years, I would see her in different plays around the country or conventions. And she started asking me to assist her at different conventions, and was eventually invited to her home. And then and this brought many dinners and many conversations. And I loved hearing all the old Hollywood gossip and stuff about, oh, what was so-and-so like and so forth. So we would chat about that. And she was very open and forthcoming about the good and the bad, in her opinion. So in my head for years, I'm thinking, this needs to be a book. This needs to be a book. And then finally, I was at her home in December of 2013, around Christmas time, and we were just putting up her Christmas tree. We had just celebrated her birthday, which was December 14th. We went into the kitchen, and I finally got the courage to ask her. I said, you told me all these wonderful stories through these years. I think it should be a book. A lot of people are forgetting some of these people that you worked with and knew, who are long gone, some of them. And here's a way to help preserve their memory. And I also said, when you're gone, these stories go with you. And this is a way of preserving all of this. And she really liked those approaches, and she readily agreed. She trusted me, not only on a friendship level, but she knew I was the Patty Duke authority. She knew I knew more about her career than she did. And so we set up a time for the following year, which was 2014, to get together, for me to fly out to her home in Idaho again and to let's work on this. So we did the majority of it by recording her on the iPad there. And I would show, because we're talking some of the people we're talking about, she hadn't seen or worked with in 50 plus years. So I brought videos with me. I brought still photos. So first person that pops up is Maureen Stapleton, who she did a TV movie with in 92.
Sure.
When we talked about Maureen Stapleton for that chapter, I would show clips of them together. I would show on my laptop, I would show still photos, and, just to kind of jog her memory on that, which I know she appreciated. And, so I would do that. And we did go through a list. I came up with a list myself of different people that she had told me stories about through the years that I thought maybe readers would be particularly interested in. And she went down the list, and I really think she crossed off maybe 2 or 3 people that she felt she didn't have anything at all nice to say about. She didn't want this to be, and I don't think it is, like a tell-all book. It's very interesting, and there is some, I guess you could say, gossip in there, here and there. More than gossip, she wanted to honor these people in these pages. And
oh gosh, yes, yeah. She chose her words wisely,
yes.
And you chose the subject matter wisely, and to some degree, you kind of chronologically. So explain how the book is formatted, because it's both people and then it's projects.
So when I did the interviews, we did in no particular order. Actually, we did them in alphabetical order when we did the interviews. And after seeing some drafts of me writing things up several months later, someone who read some of them suggested, maybe this should be in chronological order. It might flow better. And we agreed with that rather than alphabetical order. Yeah. So, there are titles, because some people she would like to mention with things, but they didn't necessarily, there wasn't enough, I guess you could say, meat to carry a full chapter on their own, if you will. So they're mentioned here, and there are little sprinkles of them mentioned here and there.
You were able to get Bear Manor Media to publish it. Mm-hmm. Presumably that was in place before she passed. And listeners, no. If you haven't figured this out by now, she's not on this call right now because she's not around to be on the call. We lost her March 29th of 2016, which was not long after I had published my Patty Duke episode of Advanced TV Herstory.
Which I heard, which I did do on iTunes back when it was released.
Did you have the publisher everything was kind of just chugging along? No.
Everything was up in the air, and she eventually did pass away. Mm. And as you just said, and about 2 months after her passing, I got her husband's blessing to continue, both legally and morally, to continue with the project. Because her part with the interview was done, thankfully, before she passed. Right. But there was still a lot of editing to do and that kind of stuff. So edited for a while, shopped it around to different publishers. Most of them wasn't interested in reading it, actually. It's not like they read the manuscript and didn't like it. I got a lot of, oh, she's dead, she can't promote it on talk shows, nobody's going to buy it kind of stuff. So, which really, I would think, because personally, me as a reader and a lover of entertainment, especially classic entertainment, to me, someone's last words would, last printed words anyway, would, weigh heavily on my decision to buy it. That would be fascinating to me, whether that's morbid or not.
Yes. So I'm gonna ask you for a second though about the well, there's just so much to talk about. The one thing I will say, listeners, and here's why it is an interesting, fascinating buy, and that is if you went to see Carrie Fisher in the last Star Wars that she was in, the last Star Wars that has been released, and you got this weird feeling because she had passed away not long after shooting her final scenes, right? I mean, it was like a matter of weeks that she had wrapped her last contributions to that film, which then went into, all of the back end production. And then she went off to London and did her thing, and then she passed away, Carrie Fisher. And you're watching it and you're going, wait a second, she's floating through space and and Princess Leia is dead. And how can this be? And how freaky is this? Is this omniscient? Did she sense something? And when you read this book, there is no question, listeners, that some of the language that Anna uses, some of the wishes, some of the regrets, some of the hope tos still, it's both bittersweet because she wants to do, she's thinking she's going to live for another, she's going to be Betty White. She's going to live till she's 94 or 95, 96. And then on the other hand, simply saying that when she's not around, she wants to be remembered for. And so, Bill, did you hear that when you were interviewing her and when you talked to her at length?
Yeah, she was still looking forward to, she still wanted an acting career. She had lived in Idaho for many years, as I mentioned. I think when she moved to Idaho, which is where her husband was from, and she decided to get away from Los Angeles and the big city and move up there in the early 90s. Back in the early 90s, however, she was queen of the TV movies when the network TV movies were still plentiful. And most of them were shot in Canada. So it didn't matter if you lived in New York or LA.
Right.
You live in Idaho, it didn't matter. When that stopped, within the subsequent decade, the acting roles really dried up a lot. And, she did work. She did seem to at least work maybe once a year or more, on average, but, not the way she had been in the 90s and before that. So she did a lot of theater and, she kept busy, but she wanted to keep going with the career. She wanted a career resurgence kind of thing. She wanted that there. And there is like you said, we have a short chapter on Betty White in the book, who she had worked with once and did a lot of Match Game episodes together in the 70s with. And she wanted to be, this isn't in the book, but she had told me directly one time that she wanted to be groomed to be like the next Betty White. Like that was like a dream of hers, to really get this career resurgence in her later years.
Yeah.
And I mean, for a lot of people have told me since the book's been published, the saddest part of the book, the saddest line, if you will, in the book is where she says, when I'm in my 70s, this is the kind of career I want to have. And we know she only made it to 69.
Right.
She didn't make it to her 70s. So, which is very sad and like you said, bittersweet.
You've talked a little bit about how the book has been received. And in fact, it contains a foreword by Gloria Vanderbilt, and it has some review quotes from some of her acting colleagues through the years.
Yes.
So did Gloria autograph your copy, or have you had any contact with Gloria about this?
I contacted Gloria right after the book was, Bear Manor had read it and they agreed to publish it last spring, almost a year ago. Mm-hmm. And she was one of the very few lists of people that Anna and I came up with that we'd like to write the forward. But Anna was kind of hesitant because, she is in her 90s and she's like, I don't want to bother her, was kind of the thing, even though, when her name was mentioned, she loved Gloria Vanderbilt and Gloria loved her.
Right.
Gloria Vanderbilt, a lot of people don't know, was an actress once upon a time in the 50s, and they did several live productions together, usually as mother and daughter. And there was a subsequent friendship that lasted through these years. They're mostly snail mail. There is a chapter on her in the book, and she does mention that whenever Gloria would write a book, she would send a copy inscribed to Anna, and almost always write to Anna, my fantasy daughter, because she never had a daughter, Gloria. And there was just this wonderful, even though they hadn't seen each other in person in almost 30 years, by the time Anna passed, there was this just wonderful friendship there that kept going long distance through all these years. And so I was able to contact Gloria, and who I'd never met before. I was able to get her contact information, and her people had asked that they read the chapter on her, which I, happily handed along. I knew she wouldn't have a problem with it because she, adores her in the chapter. It's apparent. And she, within 2 or 3 days, Gloria Vanderbilt wrote back, or her people wrote back saying like Miss Vanderbilt would love to do it. She would be honored to write the forward. And I was like, oh my God, I was just so excited. And then within.
But okay, but here's just, I'm just going to challenge you. I swear that because it kind of comes down to someone who I would be in awe of had I ever gotten to meet Anna. But in the end, she is sitting around dictating to you on an iPad. You are corresponding with Gloria Vanderbilt and talk about her people. And it's like, no, her people, her person is Anderson Cooper. He's probably the one who wrote that because he went to his mother's house on a Sunday.
Yeah. Well, actually, I do have something about that, actually.
Yes.
I received the forward, they said, would you like a handwritten one or email? And I should have taken the handwritten one, but I said email would be fine because I figured it'd be easier for her. And about 5 days later, I did receive an email, but it wasn't from her assistant like it had been before. It was actually from Anderson Cooper himself, his private email. And he said, oh, this is from my mom. My mom wanted me to send this to you for the Patty Duke book. Like, please let us know if everything's okay. Was the gist of it. And then, he had copied what she had written down for the forward. So I thought that was really, really cool. I remember I was taking a nap after work and I woke up and checked the email on my phone, and that woke me right up, between finally getting the forward by Gloria Vanderbilt, which is short but beautiful, by the way, and that Anderson Cooper was the one who sent it to me directly from his private email address. I just thought was really cool.
Very cool. Okay. Well, so there is so much in this book and there's just no way we can cover all of the people, all of the stories.
No.
So again, listeners, this is a woman who had been performing in commercials and things since she was like 10. The story is that her mother kind of gave her up due to poverty, and because these two horrible people who kind of raised her and mistreated her in so many horrible ways. And if you want to know more about that, that's what Call Me Anna's about, some of it. But as a result, she landed on Broadway doing The Miracle Worker, met Anne Bancroft. It just feels as though in terms of Broadway legend that performance probably even is still talked about today. So from Anne Bancroft and all of the people she met on Broadway and worked with, and Arthur Penn, who was the director of that theatrical performance, moving forward, she knew significant people. It's a matter of one fascinating story after the next, and they're all she's so humble with all of them. But is there one or two that just stick with you?
Certainly Anne Bancroft is one of them, who you just mentioned. She would tell you that Anne Bancroft was basically, non-related, non-family. She was probably her favorite person in the entire world, remained so all her life. She adored Anne Bancroft. So that chapter was very special to her. That was the first chapter she read when I emailed her a very rough draft of it. And she called me right after reading that chapter and was thrilled with it. Sharon Tate was another one who she worked with in Valley of the Dolls in 1967. Very good friend of hers. She has not really spoken a lot publicly about Sharon Tate in the past. In her first book, Call Me Anna, she pretty much only wrote that, the director was mean to Sharon and of the film, and that was, not much more than that. But they were very good friends, and that was the toughest chapter for her to write. She had told me she wanted to do she didn't want it to be all about the murders, which it often is whenever, obviously all of our minds go to the murders when Sharon Tate's name is mentioned. And she didn't want it to be all about that. Of course, it had to be included, but she wanted to be more about the woman, the friend, the lovely mother-to-be that she knew, not about the murder victim. And yeah, and then there were other chapters here and there that surprised me. Most of the stuff I knew some variations of from stories like I said, she had told me over the last 15, 16 years or whatever it was. There were a few surprises for me, but usually they were expanded stories from what she had already told me personally. Yeah.
Well, I will toss mine in right now so that I make sure that I get it in. And it was the one thing I will say is the tone and how you ended up having to edit down what were originally her words to either make a story seem a little more concise or, kind of eliminate some of the stuff that wasn't really necessary for the story or the memory of someone to be understood. It is really her voice is very powerful in the book. And I say that as somebody who reads a lot of biographies, autobiographies, memoirs, whatever it is. But as I was enjoying it and I could sort of hear her voice, I mean, my experience watching Patty Duke, just like you, watching Anna was as much from the Patty Duke show and like Tattletales, and so these bad game shows from the mid 70s, and then sort of not, because we didn't see The Miracle Worker when I was growing up, and I'm 15 years younger or older than you are. That movie should be up there, like it should be shown on Easter. It is so much a part of American culture, the Helen Keller story. Anyway, so I love my biographies. Candice Bergen, Katharine Hepburn, some of them really get captured in the voice of the person. So you get this joy reading this book. You get to hear all these really great, like parenthetically, you're putting in that she said, "Isn't that wild?" And it's like, that's great. I love that in her house, she would just be making an observation and say, "Isn't that wild?" Because that's such a Patty and Kathy kind of, it's kind of a leftover. So listeners, I'm just telling you this, and that is that she has this tremendous experience when meeting the man who would become her husband. They've met, they are on their honeymoon. How did that work? Anyway, so she's with him. Oh, he comes to her door, right? Because she's filming something and he is still married or getting a divorce, and yes. And so this is kind of their first moment of their romantic their romantic encounter.
He separated, yes.
And lo and behold, and they both had these premonition things that this is the right thing. And lo and behold, they look up and it's like Ripley's Believe It or Not series was playing on the motel TV, and she's like, and it's all this Shirley MacLaine stuff. And so the idea that celebrities are just real people, that she, and more importantly, she never really ever held herself in a context as being a celebrity. She was an actress. She was an actor, a performer. And the other part that you glean from this is the tremendous amount of pride she had in her craft and in being raised in her craft sort of from the previous generation. Or maybe it's the generation that came out of the theater, that your professionalism and your being on time and you're being respectful and you're being prepared was what was expected of you, and celebrity had nothing to do with it, and does that linger with you? And are those some of the observations that other readers have made?
Definitely. She was someone, and I had been on sets with her and in plays with her and whatnot. She was someone who was a big stickler to be on time or to be even early. I think there's a line in the book that says, I consider, if I'm on time, I'm late. I should be early before my call time on a set. And she learned that from people like Helen Hayes and Fred Astaire. She had said she'd worked with them when they were in their 70s, and they still did that, adhered to that. And then it was very difficult for her, Anna, as she got older, to see some of the younger actors, not all of them, of course, but some of them not have that kind of discipline anymore that she raised, and that she was raised with, rather. I remember there was a chapter in Captains and the Kings, which is a miniseries she did in the 70s that she won one of her Emmys for. And she had hurt her head and she had to have stitches the day before she was to start shooting on that. And she says, I really, luckily with the hats, the period costumes and the hats and everything and the hair, they were able to cover the scars. But she says, this reminded me that you have to, when you sign a contract as an actor for a film or television role, you are, you have to present yourself as whole to these production companies, not only for insurance reasons, if nothing else, because, you can't, for continuity reasons, you can't, look one way one day and then look another way the next day when it's supposed to be all on the same day, in the storyline of the film. You can't do that. What you mentioned earlier about, kind of feeling like she's talking to you, that's the thing I've been getting most, the reaction I'm beginning above any other thing since the book has come out in these last 2 months is that they felt like they were having a conversation with her. And that's the way that we wrote the book. That was on purpose. Anna and I had discussed that. We didn't want some scholarly, she didn't talk all highfalutin, and you know what I mean? She was a very down to earth person. Not that she was a hick, but she was very, self-educated, I would say. But she talked like you or I do. Every other word wasn't, something that, sounded Shakespearean or whatever. So we wanted it to sound like that. And as I wrote in the introduction in the book, which are in my own words, while most of the book is in first person in her words, I said that we wanted it to be like the conversations like she and I had all these years where she told me these stories that, again, where I got the idea to write the book in the first place. So it is very informal. And I think that works because you feel like you're, a lot of people have been telling me you feel like you're with a friend reading it. That is the biggest reaction that I've been getting since the book came out is I feel like I'm just sitting right with her, right next to her. And especially now that she's gone, I think that's even more poignant, I guess.
Yes. So listeners, here's the deal is Bill and I have so much to talk about, and it's feeling as though this is going to just need to be one of those conversations that gets extended to a second installment of Advanced TV Herstory. But let me just close out this installment with this, because the book itself is, it's powerful and it's inspirational, and anybody who is a fan of TV, theater, and film. This isn't just TV women that we're talking about here, although one of our most profound and most talented. This is a book that is for that person. So I really recommend. And when you think about the fact that she would even be now 71, roughly, right? Okay. So you have 70-year-olds in your life, listener, and you are looking for the Mother's Day or the Father's Day book that would be, this side of something acceptable that they would really appreciate. This is the book for them, whether it's an aunt or an uncle, grandma, grandpa, mother or father, older relative, younger relative. It just doesn't matter. This, and the thing is this, it's in her voice. She only occasionally drops the F-bomb or uses what she would profess to be is far less profanity than she used to, because she had just kind of grown out of that. So it really is in her voice, and what a tremendous gift this would be that you would think about ordering Bill's book, In the Presence of Greatness, My 60-Year Journey as an Actor, written technically by Patty Duke and William Jankowski. So listeners, that's where I'm going to leave you with. And then I'm going to ask that you pick this installment up again, part 2, when Bill and I get in a little bit more in depth, really about that walk that I explained early on that she took through some of these names, through some of these productions, where she felt it was important to write a situation that had been impacted by her lack of a bipolar diagnosis or her early bipolar diagnosis when she was still really trying to get a handle on how to control everything that was going on with her body and her brain. So it has been a pleasure touching base at this point with Bill Jankowski, and we are going to come back for another episode here in just a minute. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. You can reach me at advancedtvherstory@gmail.com. You can find the podcast on Twitter, Advanced TV Herstory. On Facebook, on Twitter, we are at TV Herstory, and Instagram, Advanced TV Herstory. So one way or another, if you jam the words TV and Herstory together, you pretty much will find the broadside of the barn. I have to give thanks, obviously, to Bill for spending some really excellent time and walking down this fabulous journey that he's been on with us, and also sharing some of the parts that Anna herself took as a result of the process to get this book generated. I also want to thank Jen Eads, who is the editrix of this fine broadcast. She makes it all sound that much better, and we, curiously enough, do not and ah nearly the way we should. The music you hear as a part of this show is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, which can be found at Free Music Archive. As always, you can find more information about this podcast and what we hope to accomplish every single episode by going to tvherstory.com. And also because, Bill and I are out doing things, and Bill does his thing, I do my thing. My other thing is speaking about this and really holding up some of the standards of achievement and persistence and leadership that these stories bring to light. And it's only through knowing about TV women and talking about TV women that I have newfound perspective on feminism and American herstory as it's been experienced. Go to CynthiaBemisAbrams.com if you have any desire for me to be on your podcast, or you'd like to talk with me and have me speak at your organization, because that's what I do. Lastly, because this podcast costs money to produce in many different fashions, really accomplished people are contributing to an increased quality and presence of the podcast. You could go to tvherstory.com. Become a patron of this podcast. Scroll down at the homepage at tvherstory.com down to become a patron. Those dollars pay for editors and all sorts of other behind the scenes costs. Because what we really want to do is keep cranking out this excellent content, making friends with people like Bill Jankowski, and telling the stories of great, great ladies like Anna Patty Duke. Thanks for listening, listeners. You are why I do this. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.